Hello, everybody. This is another interview with another expert. And for the Divorce Magazine, if you have not visited the Divorce Magazine YouTube channel or the website, please do so. There's so many interviews there with people who know a lot about the world of divorce and separation and breakup. On the website, we have loads of articles, which are all written by professionals within the divorce and separation industry. Except the ones that are written from people's own relationship breakups. So they write it from their experiences. So today we have yet another expert, Bryan Reeves. I have to say thank you, Bryan, for sending me your book.
Mm.
The title immediately got me, and the book is Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her. And this is something that, I know that my friends and I, we have kind of like discussed it, whether they were male, female, or them. We've kind of like discussed it and saying, but I don't understand why. If
Mhm.
you're in a relationship, you just don't do the right thing by your person. So
Mm.
when I read that, I was like, yeah, exactly. That's my thought.
Mm.
So that got me. And then, but what I usually do, Bryan, is when I have somebody that I'm interviewing, or if we have an event panel, I'll introduce the people there. Usually I would introduce, but as I was writing out your bio and reading about you, I thought, I think this will come much better from Bryan himself, because the story is very different from the
Yeah.
bio of a divorce solicitor, for instance. This is
Yeah.
life and relationship coach,
Yeah.
which you are. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, first, I love that. I appreciate that you introduced me as an expert in this domain.
Are
I
you
like
one of
what,
the people who don't like the word expert?
well, I don't mind it. I'm
Okay,
not opposed to it, but I like what Esther Perel, she is like
I know
the,
her.
the elder of relationship studies these days. She's fantastic. I love
Yes.
what she says about that word. She says there's no such thing as expert relationship experts. There are, but what there are is people who have studied and thought a lot about relationships.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that I am. I am definitely someone
Okay.
who has studied and thought and reflected and worked at relationship for many, many, many years. And in large part, and I know that's kind of unusual too. There's not a lot of men that tend to do that, except if they go to school to study it, they become therapists and just walk that path.
Mhm.
And my path is different. I didn't come to it through that traditional path. I came to it as I'm a former military officer, United States Air Force. I was a captain. I was in the Air Force for about 10 years. Before that, I was in a fraternity in college. Before that, I was just a boy growing up in Western culture. And, again, fast forward. So, boy, fraternity, brother. I was even president of my fraternity. Then I was in the Air Force, captain. Now I'm 26 years old. And Soila, I can't feel anything in my body.
Mhm.
I can't feel happiness. I can't feel sadness, like no joy, no, just dead, dead inside.
Mhm.
And very educated. I got a master's degree in human relations. So I started studying human relations when I was in the military, of all places, because it was just fascinated me. But my relationships with women were just disastrous over and over and over again. And that marked, so I got out of the military at 26. I actually married a woman in France that I had met only 5 weeks prior to marrying her. Not one of my better decisions.
Mhm.
Uh, but
Yeah.
uh, but but I will say that set me on a path that brought me here today.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I I wouldn't plan how any of this is unfolded, but I'm grateful for it at the same time. But, so I just was disastrous at relationships for years and years and years, and it was really, so I'm 49 now, and it was really at the age of 36 that I resolved to stop sucking at love and
And
relationship.
are you going to tell us what came with that resolve? Resolving, was it, or am I jumping the gun a little bit? I
No,
want to,
no, that's okay. No.
when you said you resolved, how did that come about?
Well, I was in a 5-year relationship that again just brought me to my knees. It's actually, so the title of the book is Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her. And that was f born of an article, an essay that I wrote in 2015 called Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her. And it was about that relationship because I realized, I woke up and realized, not when I was in the relationship, but years after in my reflections, when I was actually working with couples. I was already coaching couples at this time. And I was having just still learning so much myself and waking up so much myself to just all the mistakes that I had made, all of the things that I had just foolishly, just ignorantly. I like to say we're all ignorant. I'm sorry. We are all innocent in our ignorance. We're all innocent in our ignorance. If we knew better, we would do better.
Mm.
And I didn't know better. So I didn't do very well. And I made so many just god awful, painful mistakes, that not even the big ones. I don't mean the big obvious ones like cheating or physical abuse. I don't mean those kinds of things. I mean just the inability to be vulnerable, the projecting all of my unresolved stuff onto my partners and expecting them to just perform, show up in certain ways so that I could feel better, and so it was that 5 year relationship. I wrote about that epiphany of whoa, I said I was with her, but I really wasn't.
Wow.
I wasn't really fully choosing her. In fact, the first line of that essay, which is in the book, is I spent 5 years hurting a good woman by staying with her, but never fully choosing her. And that was, again, that was just part of all the epiphanies that I was having. But it was that relationship that was like the most important relationship of my life until that time. And I think this is true for a lot of men. We don't really start to do this work until we hit bottom. And a lot of men, we run into the what I call the limits, the limitations of our adolescent psychology, usually around the end of our 30s or in our 40s. Look, some men never
Mm.
cross that threshold. Some men live psychologically adolescent for their entire lives. Many men do, I would say. But I think more and more these days, men are hitting those limits in their late 30s and 40s, and thus begin many men in their 50s. Hell, I work with guys in their 60s as well who are just waking up to all of this. And that's what it was for me. It was a relationship. So
Yeah.
that brought me to my knees, and I just was like, I can't be destined to suck at this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. When you're talking about that line, the opening line to your essay,
Yeah.
um, I felt a little bit like, oh, wow,
Mm,
the realization that you had done that to somebody. But I'm thinking to myself, how when okay, and I know I have questions here, and I'm just going to one that
yeah. Yeah.
is in there because I want to go into that. Choose her every day or leave her. What does that actually look like? Because
Yeah.
how do you make sure that you're showing that you're choosing her? Because I think we okay, not everybody, but I think women, we don't really ask for that much in terms of to be shown that somebody is actually thinking about us. It could be a little text, a little this,
Mm,
I don't know, just something to show that I am thinking about you. And we feel quite, ooh,
mm.
he's thinking about me even after 20 years, 30 years, he's still thinking about me.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. And what I've there's a spectrum of how people process and deal with conflict or disagreement. And when two people come together in relationship, it's like two different, I call it two different thought worlds, two different cultures. I don't care if you grew up in the same culture, you still are steeped in different family dynamics, family systems, etc. And when we come together, there are there are couples that tend to be high conflict, and there are couples that tend to be low conflict. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're succeeding just because there's low conflict. Oftentimes, what that actually means is somebody is just they're not having the uncomfortable conversations that they should be having, right? Someone's just taking whatever breadcrumbs they can get and making themselves happy about it as best they can. They're not really happy, but women and men can do that for decades, right? Just take whatever I get, um, in the hopes that I won't be left. On the flip side of that, though, there's the high conflict couple, which is the couple that they're just going to put everything on the table all the time, but they have no skills how to actually work through it and repair. And so they're living in high conflict all the time, stressed out. And this was me. I'm more in the high conflict profile, and I've always chosen women that were more high conflict, right? So my relationships tended to have an explosive nature to them, whereas uh, again, but what's interesting, Soila, is I had been in relationships where my partner was not high conflict, and I didn't want to be in those. It was kind
Why
of,
is that? Because I'm really I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's something that I've often wondered. Why is it that some people would rather be, you know, how people say that there are women who just like bad boys. So the ones
Mhm.
who just treat them, and then you get a really nice guy who's
Yeah,
attentive, who, chooses you every day, and you're
yeah,
like, too nice. No.
yeah. It's a such a it's a deep, deep question. I think what we're really seeking for in a partner is someone who has range. One of the maps that I work with is the masculine feminine map, which I want to be really clear. I do not mean that masculine does not mean man and feminine does not mean woman. Right? We all have masculine and feminine capacity that those kinds of expressions through us. And so what comes up for me in that question is like we're attracted to people who are in contact with their own dark energy. Their own, it's like why we love to go watch horror movies. There's a darkness that we're all attracted to, that we each have in our shadow. I mean, we're getting into some, potentially deep psychological conversations here, but um, we want somebody who we're instinctively drawn to, somebody who's in touch with their dark masculine, their dark feminine. What happens though is when we as we ourselves are not yet really growing, we're still in our own immaturity, we're still living in our own mother wounds and father wounds. We may be attracted only to that darkness, and somebody, if they don't have range, if that person doesn't have capacity to be in there, let's say light masculine or light feminine. I know I'm throwing around terms here that would need some definition and further elucidation, but
At this
um,
point, I can say it's in my book
sure.
because
Thank
it
you.
is.
That's actually very helpful. It's in
Yeah.
my book. Yeah. So, because men, we're drawn to, here's how I frame it. Here's how I've experienced it in my past, in my own choices. I've always been attracted to women that on some level I knew could metaphorically, not literally, but metaphorically kill me. What I mean by that is metaphorically kill the parts of me that do not serve.
Right.
There's a something I like to say about the difference between boys and men is boys save, men serve. Boys want to be the hero.
Right.
I can unpack that a little bit. Boys want to be the hero. They want to be the one that scores the touchdown at the end of the game. They want to be the one that everyone looks at and goes and puts on a pedestal. Oh, you're so amazing. You've saved us from the dragon or from whatever. The hero, that archetype of the hero is not relational. He doesn't need it. He just needs a dragon to fight. And it doesn't even almost matter what treasure the dragon guards. It's just some ambiguous, amorphous treasure is fine. I don't care what it is. Just give me a dragon to fight.
It's about them.
It's about them. Exactly. And that's a boyhood, that's an adolescent psychological archetype, and it's very important. We all have to progress through our own men and women have to progress through our own hero stories. But as adults, we're relational. We start living in a question of, well, how does my behavior impact the
Yeah.
people in front of me? How do I serve? Not sacrifice, which is what the hero also is about, sacrifice, but how do I serve? How do I be a part of the conversation? How do I embrace what my partner needs to be a part of the conversation? Like it's a question that I live inside of. And so I think we men in our boyhood mentality, psychology, we're drawn to the dark feminine, the Kali energy, that the destructor of worlds, with all her arms that can just slice off the heads of BS, of insanity, because we need that. We need that death. We need that in order for the adult to emerge. We need that death. And similarly, I think to women, there's a confrontation, there's a loss of innocence that is required in order to step into true adulthood. And I think women are drawn to that, the bad boy, because he's going to rob her of her innocence. And the bad boy sadly does it very painfully. Does it is it's a violation. It's not a nice thing. It's not, but yet it also has to happen on some level. You know, for a woman to become a true adult, she also has to not lose innocence, but she has to grow beyond her naive innocence into an adult that can really be present with reality, right? Innocence is a this beautiful purity that is in denial of sorts of the dangers of the actual world.
Mm.
So
Mm.
anyway, I'll pause there.
No, it's really interesting just to understand how that happens and how people navigate their relationships in the world in different ways, but yet kind of similarly in some ways. Um,
Yeah.
so I think you have three parts in your book. So I'm
Yes.
just going to start with the first one, which you call
Yep.
preparation,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And in this part, there was one section that actually I thought to myself, how, again, there's some parts in your book that I personally can relate to.
Mhm.
There's some that I can't personally relate to, but I can feel,
Yeah.
if this were to happen to me, because you use a lot of your own experiences and, it brings
Yes.
it alive, the sections. And, just clarifying what it is that you mean. So I'm just going to read what I have here. So you have one section which is embracing the ache of loneliness. And then the
Yeah.
quote that you had there, because I read that and I thought, oh yes, yeah, we hear a lot about loneliness. Then I read that quote that you have there, and you said, "This is dedicated to the lonely, even
Mm.
the lonely who have partners."
Mm. Yeah.
And that I really thought to myself, yes,
Mm.
this is because you can be, like they
Mm.
say, you can be lonely in a crowd, you can
Mm.
be very lonely in a relationship.
Oh yeah.
And it makes it hard when people walk away from that kind of relationship because people will turn around and go, but he's such a nice person. Oh, but he's such, or she's absolutely wonderful. But when they're just the two of them, you're
Oh,
reaching out for somebody, but they're not there.
yeah. I think one of the loneliest places a human can be is lying right next to their intimate partner that they don't feel connected with and don't know how to bridge the
Mm,
gap with. That's certainly been my experience. You know, that late night, you've gone to bed and oh my God, it's just like this isn't working. I don't understand why. What are we missing? Why can't I connect with this person? Why,
mm,
again, in my case, why is she so mad at me all the time? What is happening? Oh, my heart. You know, I'm wanting to touch her, to make love, to
yeah,
get lost in each other's eyes
yeah.
and to feel her adoration and to offer her mine, but none of that seems available. It is excruciating.
Yeah. But what you're describing, Brian, it sounds like the initial honeymoon stage. Can that last? Do you think you can still be in that blissful state, you know, 7 years down the line, 15 years, 20 years, or does it transform without the loneliness creeping in?
I so we live in a youth worshiping culture, right? We want everything to stay young. We want every season to be summer. And this is reflected in our relationships too. We want the honeymoon phase to last
That's
forever.
beautiful, yeah.
And I think this is in just, again, it's just our beautiful, innocent ignorance about how the reality of things. It's also a reflection of our disconnect from life. That's not how life works. Life is seasonal, right? Life is circular. There's Clarissa Pinkola Estes, the author of Women Who Run with the Wolves,
Mm,
a masterpiece book. She talks a lot in that book about the life, death, life cycle
mm,
that is that we are very disconnected from in our culture, and it's reflected in that desire that the honeymoon lasts forever. In fact, if we're being honest with this new person that we're relating to, things are going to come up within a few, if not weeks, a few months, that are going to cause a sort of, oh boy, what are we doing here?
yeah.
You know, there it's like that in her book, in fact, one of my favorite chapters is called Skeleton Woman. I'm promoting another woman's book. Hopefully are you familiar with Women Who Run with the Wolves?
I am, yeah,
Oh, it's a masterpiece.
yeah.
Incredible book.
Big book.
Uh, Big book. It's a big, poetic, dense, and profound book. Absolutely. But there's this beautiful chapter called Skeleton Woman where this fisherman, it's all told through metaphors and myths, where this fisherman catches a skeleton on the end of his hook. I'm just giving you the very short version of it. And this skeleton is of a woman, and it freaks him out, and but she gets caught on his hook, and as he's rowing back to shore trying to get away from skeleton woman, she's on the hook and she's bouncing along on the waves. It looks like she's chasing him,
Mm.
and that freaks him out even more. So he runs to his cabin to get away from her, carrying his fish and tackle. And again, she's on his hook, so she's bouncing along after him. Anyway, this is a metaphor story for how as soon as we have like someone on the hook, when we step into real relationship with someone and we really want to not just have a purely pleasurable experience. Clarissa in that chapter, she says something beautiful. To love pleasure takes little. To love truly takes a hero that can manage his own fear.
Mm.
And the reason I love this skeleton woman metaphor, and but I mean, all this stuff is like I read that book in my own preparation for being in a marriage, right? I mean, a lot of that it's infused into the book that I've written, Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her. A lot of the awakenings, the epiphanies as a man, like, oh my God, reading this book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, and that chapter, Skeleton Woman, was profoundly reorienting for me. It opened my eyes. That skeleton woman, that knowing that when I get into a relationship, if I'm having a real relationship with somebody, skeleton woman is right there. She is the life cycle. She is the something has to die in order for me to really step into relationship. The single man has to die. The man who doesn't need to be concerned with how his behavior impacts another person on a daily basis, that has to die, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
man who just wants it my way has to die.
If the
And
relationship is to survive, yeah.
uh, and truly succeed.
Yeah.
And so I
That's
think, this idea that the honeymoon can last is a myth. It's a myth. Now, I think when we do the work, when we confront skeleton woman, when we realize, wow, okay, all of my stuff is going to come up. My wife, we met 8.5 years ago, and she broke up with me 4 months into our relationship. And Soila, at the time, I was already like a world-renowned relationship coach and author. My blogs were being read by millions of people around the world. Like, I got it going on,
yeah.
Soila. Like, I'm the guy that
And it's
should do
in the book.
it's in that's right. I write about this. And I found this amazing woman. I was doing all the right things, so I thought, just telling like I knew what to do. And still, all my stuff came up. She broke up with me. I mean, her stuff came up too, and she broke up with me 4 months in because I didn't know how, like, the parts of me that don't want to die don't want to die, right? So she would say this thing. She would say, Brian, you're like a single guy that says
Mm.
he wants to be in relationship. And I was puzzling out. I didn't know what she was talking about. Like, what do you mean? I even put you on Facebook. Like I told the I said I'm in a relationship on Facebook. Isn't that the gold standard these days for claiming somebody? But no, it was, you know, and stuff was coming up for her, and I did not know how to turn into it, to be with it, to comfort her, to. Instead, I did what I would always do: is I'd cross my arms and turn away from her and be like, "Well, that's your problem, not mine," as an example,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Do you think,
So,
if I can
yeah.
use that as an example, do you think that would have been an example of the loneliness within a partnership, that maybe she was experiencing that loneliness?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't think I've ever made that connection before, but I think that's true. I think that's a really good point. I think she was feeling, see, here she was on some level knowing like I am a man that she could feel deeply safe with,
Yeah.
and she knew like both of us saw in each other eternities, love in a profound way, and that we were working with a therapist at the time who after our breakup, we worked with a therapist who, when we got back together, who shared with us, who helped us see that, look, it's because you feel so safe with each other that this stuff is coming up.
Mhm.
It's not because you're bad for each other. It's because you feel safe that all the stuff that didn't get to come up with previous partners is now coming up. That was really helpful for us. Um, and I do believe for sure, like my inability still to lean in to hold her when she was going through whatever she was going through that I didn't understand. Yeah, I'm sure that that created a loneliness and a like here's this promise of love at a level she's never experienced before, and yet it's unavailable.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that is the loneliness, isn't it?
Okay. So the other part in your part one in preparation that I wanted to bring up, where you say healing sometimes means learning to live in peace with the pain.
Yeah.
And the quote that you have there, and you give your own experience as well, but the quote that you have there says, "Yet despite all the inner work I've done and all the beautiful insights my mind and heart are fortunate to see, there are
Yeah.
some sorrows from my past that just never seem to fully exhaust their sadness."
Yeah. Yeah.
So living in peace with the pain.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I regularly work with, as I said earlier, I work with men and we do a lot of group work around our relationships.
Mm.
I have this 6 month program called Elevate Your Relationship that is for exclusively for men who are struggling in relationship and want to do better. And men often come in when they start to learn some of the insights and the skills and things that I teach both in the book and in this coaching experience. And this is what happened to me. They start going, "Oh my God, I can't believe I was doing that to my partner. No wonder she turned away from me. No wonder she doesn't want to have sex with me anymore. I never helped her feel safe. Because I thought I was safe and I was unsafe in all these ways, in my expectations, in my own closure, in my lack of presence, and on and on and on. What I'm often encouraging men to do is to hold on to that pain. Let that pain of 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 the past be a gift in your heart. Be a source of I have this memory of a past girlfriend, and actually the one in that 5 year relationship that brought me to my knees. I have this memory where we're in a staircase in an apartment building. This is probably towards the end of our relationship, and she was um, we were fighting. And I remember just doing what I always do, crossing my arms, turning away from her, just closed, defended. I so don't want to be here. And I'm communicating that through my body language. And she was, look, I was unskillful. She was unskillful. Neither of us knew what the hell we were doing in relationship. But I remember she was practically begging me to just stay in that moment. Don't leave her in that moment. Not the relationship, but just. And I was like, I got to be somewhere else. I'm leaving. I'm heading out of here. And I remember at the time, all I saw was an angry, spiteful, even cruel woman in front of me. Because she could be pretty nasty. She could be pretty awful with her words. But what I couldn't see at the time that I can see now is the woman in pain beneath all of that. And I have that memory. I look back and I see how I responded. Just a man in pain, two innocently ignorant people, but I see her pain now. I see it so clearly, and it breaks my heart that I didn't see it in that moment. And I didn't see it for 1,000 moments in that 5 years with her. It breaks my heart, Soila. I'll tell you, that's a pain that I keep dear. I don't want to necessarily for that to go away or heal it because I want to use that to make sure I never do that to my wife in the future, today or in the future. And I'm still that old pattern is still present. The old cross my arms, turn my body, and screw you. This is your fault. This is your problem. I'm not responsible for how you feel. Blah blah blah. I don't want to ever go back there. So I think learning to live in peace with the pain. I think our past messes and mistakes can be the greatest gifts if we allow them to.
And I see where you're going with that a lot because there are people who will use, like, even within therapeutic session, where they will say, I have my nightmares, but sometimes I don't want to get rid of them completely because they remind me of what is important. Um,
Right. Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
to a
Yeah.
little piece of it.
Yeah.
Want to get rid of it. And when we're talking about that, I'm just thinking about that living in peace with the pain when it's like going through divorce,
Mhm.
um, and then the divorce happens, and you go through it, you get your decree absolute, like we call it in the UK, and then but the pain is still there, and learning to accept that it will be there for
Yeah.
a while. It's not going to
Maybe
unless.
maybe the rest of your life to some degree.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Stephen Jenkinson is an author who and a man who's worked with the dying for many, many years. Are you familiar with Stephen Jenkinson?
Not actually, no.
He wrote a book called Die Wise, and he says that we are death phobic and grief illiterate
Mm,
in our modern world. And I think this is part of our grief illiteracy, the wanting to get rid of the pain as quickly as possible, to not wanting to be in the pain. And even a relationship that was terrible, my relation the relationship I was in for 5 years was, it was not a good relationship. It was chaotic. We both hurt each other in so many ways. We were in and out, in and out. It was not a healthy relationship ever. We had blow up fights every 2 or 3 days,
mm,
Soila, when we were together. If we went a week without a fight, that was like a remarkable. Like, oh, there's hope.
yeah. That's
And
actually, sorry, go on. Go on, Ben.
no, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say that brings me nicely to the next section, where we are doing part two, dancing in the fire.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay, got it.
where you have that section, thank you for leaving me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good. Let's get to that in a moment. Um, but that even that relationship, 5 years, I was so relieved when it was over. Like, oh, it was like springtime. It was a very painful winter, that relationship, and then oh, springtime. But actually, once that jubilation wore off, oh my God, now the grieving began. And I grieved that relationship, the loss of her, for years. That pain lasted me for years. I mean, she would still, even in my dreams, I would have dreams of her. Even when I met the woman that's now my wife, and she knows this. We've talked about this, and her too. She also was grieving past relationships, even while we were forming ours, and it wasn't a problem for us. We knew that that's just part of the process, and it's okay. And oh yeah, I mean, it's, ah, yeah. I think that pain is a reminder that we loved.
Yeah. So tell us about the thank you for leaving me, because that brings us very
Uh,
nicely into the section, thank you for leaving me.
Oh yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for leaving me. I wrote when my girlfriend, now my wife, broke up with me 4 months in.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
I was devastated. I was, again, it came out of nowhere. I didn't obviously didn't expect it, didn't want it. And so I wrote that essay, Thank You for Leaving Me, though, because I've always been a silver linings kind of guy, and it's like, okay, this devastating thing is happening, well, let me find the gift in it. I had always lived with this fear. One of my greatest fears, Soila, is that, because I think for a lot of my younger life, I would date women and they would fall pretty hard for me, and I would become the one for them pretty quick, and I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for a long time. And I had this fear that, oh God, one day I'm going to meet the woman who is my one, and she's not going to want to be with me. Like, karma's coming for me. That was like one of my greatest fears. Like, I'll never get to love fully. And so when Sylvie is my wife, when she broke up with me, it was like, oh my God, it happened. My greatest fear, because she's the one that I waited. I'm 41 years old. I waited a lifetime for her, and now she doesn't want to be with me. It's like, it's happening. The greatest fear. And thank you for leaving me is my letter to her that I didn't send to her, because at the time she wasn't open to receiving it, but it was my letter of thank you for cracking the armor around my heart, so that I can love more fully now. I can surrender more fully. A friend of mine, in seeing someone go through a grieving, around a death of a pet many, many years ago, said, um, this heartbreak you're experiencing can be your heart breaking open.
Mm,
And that image never left me. We think of heartbreak as something terrible, something to avoid, something we should never have. And look, I'm not saying that, there are things that I would never wish on anybody that are heartbreaking. But this vision, this idea of a heart breaking open so that I can love ever more fully, I can give and receive love. Rumi said that the wound is where the light enters us.
Mm.
And that's what this chapter is really infused of. It's that hopeful gratitude for being broken open in such a painful way.
Because you talk about the gifts her living gave you. And
Yeah,
in that chapter, you give so many thank yous, and I put some of
yeah,
them here. I didn't
yeah,
know how many there were, so I started writing them down, and then I found how many there were, and I thought it's okay. So you have some thank you for helping me remember, and then you say what that helped the breaking up helped you remember. Thank you for reminding me, or
yeah.
thank
Well,
you.
like that one. That's yeah. Thank you for. I'm curious what number you came up with. I've never counted.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't finish.
Oh, okay. Wow, there's a lot of thank yous. Well, that like thank you for reminding
That's
me
many
that
gifts.
oh, so many gifts. Like even that. Okay, it's not a woman who defines my worth. Thank you. Because you're leaving me, and I realize that I even as heartbreaking as this is, I'm okay. It's not a reflection of who I am. You've made a choice. I didn't want you to make that choice, but you made a choice, and I honor that and respect that. And it's not a reflection of my heart. And that was a again, a good reminder.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking how, working with people who are going through divorce
Mm,
and having been through divorce myself and knowing the pain that you have
yeah,
before the marriage breaks down, during the marriage, after
yeah,
it does, and all of that.
yeah,
Getting to that point where it's almost like I don't, well, now my ex and I are good friends, but I don't want to, it would never have occurred to me to say thank you. It's almost like thanking him, but I don't want
mm,
to thank him. I want
mm.
to just, you see what I mean? It's like,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's like forgiveness is never for the other person. It's for me. Really, in the end. And I'm not suggesting that we just rush around and forgive everyone who's ever hurt us. No, I mean, forgiveness is its own process, it takes its own time.
yeah,
But you've probably heard that saying, resentment is like drinking poison, hoping the other person gets sick. Well, it's the same way. If the marriage is ending, if the breakup is happening, look, feel the anger. I remember I did a practice
yeah.
for quite some time after when that 5-year relationship ended, and I started to feel some profound anger in the years following. It was maybe 3 years after the relationship was over. All the anger that I had suppressed because I took on so much of the burden. Like I messed this up. This was my fault. Yeah, I was the bad guy. And once, after a few years, like I started seeing, wait, she did so many horrible things. She was cruel. She was mean. She hurt me. And you can't just bypass that.
Mm.
But so what I did at that time is I did this practice I call anger yoga, where it's in this instance I did it in the shower. It's just because the being held by the water in the bathroom, nobody in the house can hear me, and I just said all the nastiest things that I needed to say to her in the shower, not to her, not to anybody, right? It wasn't spiritual, it wasn't all gratitude and rainbows. No, it was, may I curse for a moment? It was fuck you, you motherfucker. How could you fucking do that to me? You fucking fuck you, it just was like so fucking angry. And I probably did that, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 times over the course of a month. Again, in the shower, not to her, not to anybody. Just I didn't hurt myself. I didn't hurt her. I didn't hurt I didn't rip the shower head off the wall. Just moving it through my body. And I'll tell you that I was never angry at her again. I didn't need an apology from her. I didn't need anything. I didn't need closure. I didn't need this, didn't need that. I wasn't going to get it anyway. That's part of what I was so angry about. So, but doing that practice was for me. It wasn't maybe in some way she benefits. I don't know, and psychically, energetically, cutting the ties. Who knows? But it was for me, and similarly, that essay. Thank you for leaving me. It was for me. It was to make sure that I'm not carrying resentment and heaviness as I move on.
When you were going through, the thank you for leaving me part and all of that, were you working with somebody, or was it you just doing it on your own? How I know how important it is to see that, okay, the marriage is over, the breakup has happened. But like you say, there
Yeah,
are gifts there, but sometimes it's so difficult when you're working with somebody
yeah,
who is almost determined not to see even one little tiny nugget of a gift,
yeah.
you know.
I get that. I totally get that. And look, my Sylvie, who was my girlfriend at the time, look, she was amazing in breaking up with me. It was the best breakup, best. She was the kindest breaker upper I've ever met. So I couldn't be angry. It was hard to be angry at her or at the situation. I was angry at life.
Mm.
How could you do this? I knew it. This was going to happen. That kind of thing. But I, and then again, I don't think rushing to the thank you is maybe not appropriate. When there's real hurt, real harm, real damage, I think we have to be with that anger. We have to be with the pain of that before we can turn it into a gift. I think that is premature for a lot of people. It can take potentially months and really years even to get to the place where, okay, I can now see this as a gift. I do think that there's some grieving and that we have to move through in many cases before we can get there.
I'm just thinking just about that, when you're saying we need to see it as a gift,
Mm.
how important it is to I don't know how to put this. It's almost like to say seeing it as a gift because of your own growth. So when you're saying thank you for, just to make it clear, is thank you for yourself, but not thank you for leaving me because now I have met somebody else.
No, I hadn't met somebody else.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying in general,
Yeah,
thank you that you're talking about. It's not thank you for leaving me because now I have somebody fantastic. It's thank you for leaving me because I have grown. I have
yeah,
seen,
right.
I've got the gifts for
E-
myself, which can
Exactly.
then prepare me for,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. It's yeah, you're right. It's not thank you because you left me and now I have something better.
Yeah.
No, I'm still in the heartache. I'm still in the chasm between what was and what is to be. I'm still in that painful void. But in that painful void is the work of mining for the gold.
Yeah.
What you think is a mountain of shit, if we search inside of it, there is gold in there that we can take with us into our next experience. And that's what that's about.
When you go to from thank you for leaving me, then you have another section that you're saying sometimes the best gift is leaving your partner.
Uh, uh-huh. Yeah.
And what I liked, I've written here, the twist here is making the leaver aware of how they could have helped their partner. So for
Mhm,
your girlfriend, now your wife,
mhm,
when she left you and you had all the thank you for leaving me,
mhm.
then there's the part for of you, thank you. If she left you, then she can look at it and say thank you for leaving him to herself. Because now
Yeah.
what has
Yeah.
happened here.
Yeah, again, I think this is common for a lot of men. We won't change until we have no choice.
Right.
What happens in a lot of relationships is, I mean, I had a woman just the other day sharing with me that for 15 years she's been trying to please her husband, cater to him, say all the nice things, trying not to be critical of him, give him feedback about what she needs, and she's been doing it for 15 years. And what comes up for me is, well, why have you been doing that for 15 years? 15 years? Well, no wonder nothing is changing because you've been doing it for 15 years and he hasn't had to change. So why do you think all of a sudden he's going to change now? Like,
Mm.
if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so, you know, th- th- Sometimes the best gift is leaving your partner. That chapter I wrote, really again in that mindset, from the viewpoint of look, I'm a man, so I know a man's experience and obviously my own more than any other man's, but I see patterns. I've been working with men. I've been working with couples for what are we, 2024, for about 10 years now. I just see patterns, and nothing applies to everybody, but in patterns, so many men, we can, this is an interesting statistic. 70% of divorces these days are initiated by women. And a lot of times men are taken by surprise that their partners don't want to be with them anymore. Like, what do you mean? We have no problems. Everything's fine.
You've been like this for 15 years. What's wrong?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now you want a divorce? We've been, but 50, like, what's changed? Nothing. That's the problem. Nothing has changed. And, but see, men, we can stay in that discomfort for a long time. If the only consequences are you're upset, well, that sucks, but fine, I can live with that. If those are the only consequences, or just you're going to be upset and say things, well, I can zone out. I can watch TV. I can go focus on work. I can focus on my hobby. I can play video games. I can watch porn. So many ways I can go and check out of the relationship. That's easy for most guys. It's not comfortable necessarily, but it's easy. And so, sometimes the best gift is leaving your partner. Well, I'm not. I think there's another essay in the book that every couple should break up.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't mean that every couple should break up, but there is. But in order to escape codependence, because that's what that 15-year relationship is about. It's about a codependent way of being. If I just do it the right way, then you'll love me, kind of thing. Or if you do it the right way, then I'll feel loved, right? That's, I don't know, a simplistic way of defining codependence. Like, I'm not okay unless you do X, Y, or Z, and vice versa. Well, the step out of codependence is independence, becoming independent of my partner's whims. If they give me what I want, then I'm okay. Like, being okay even when they don't give me what I want, right? And so I think sometimes the best gift is leaving your partner. Not done out of maliciousness, not done out of, it's not a punishment that I'm encouraging. It's just if you're genuinely not getting your needs met and you've learned how to communicate that in skillful ways, to give feedback and be honest, be- uh, in being courageously vulnerable about what it is that you're needing and wanting, and your partner repeatedly doesn't show up for that. Well, again, you can try for 15 years to hope that they'll show up for it,
Mm.
and maybe they will someday. It's not likely,
Sure.
not in my experience,
Yeah.
but leaving them maybe. And this is what happened to me even 4 months into my relationship with Sylvie. Her leaving me revealed to me
Seem to wake you up.
that in fact, we had a phone call. What got us back together is we got on the phone, and I was so broken open. I was just like, again, all my success that I'd been having, it just meant nothing to me. If love wasn't in my life, none of that mattered. It was so empty and meaningless. And I felt that when she broke up with me. I felt the void of that. In fact, I was at a conference center. I was giving a presentation at a spa conference, around doing business with a mindset of love. Like, that was my presentation to these spa owners. And Sylvie called me at the end of the day, and I was in this cavernous, conference centers. They're huge, and they're cavernous, like big giant hallways. And I remember she called me, and she didn't break up with me in that moment, but I heard it in her voice. I was like, oh my God, she's gonna break up with me. And she was like, well, we'll talk, when you get home. I was traveling, and we'll talk when you get back. And I was like, oh my God, it's over. And I remember hanging up the phone, Suela, and feeling the emptiness, those cavernous, that cavernous hallway. It's like in that moment I was walking around in the psychological space within which men kill themselves because we get everything, we achieve what we think we're supposed to, we do what we think we're supposed to do, and it still doesn't work. And that was really important for me to see, to taste that, to touch that, to be inside of that, because that's what enabled me after a few weeks of being in that experience of getting back on the phone with her and being like, woman, all I want to do is learn how to love you. That's it. I just want to learn how to love you. And I realized I wasn't up to that game before. I thought I knew how to love you, but clearly I didn't. There's so much more I need to learn, not just about love, but about you, how to love you. And that's the transition that couples need to make and men need to make. How to love you. We men come in with all our preconceived notions about who we are and what we think we're capable of and what good lovers we are and this and that, or maybe what good lovers we aren't. We come in with that idea too. How to love the woman in front of you. And to do that, we need to listen. We need to
Yeah.
pay attention, soften our own resistance, face her. Like, I mean, that's a whole journey.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you, and you started touching on it there. I was going to ask you, what what do you do different now?
Well, for I've said this a few times that one of the things I do in my body when I get upset or when I start to get defended is I cross my arms, yep, and turn away. And so just one of the very first things I do, because I still can do that. That's a pattern. It's an old pattern in my body of defensiveness. I'm defending myself. I'm closing and defending. So I'll uncross my arms. I'll turn and face her, and I'll just breathe. That's just one little thing that I can do. I mean, now we're off into the skills and the practice, how to lean into relationship in the moment. I don't mean and I mean very practical terms,
Yeah.
right? Not abstract poetic terms, but practical and that using my body, how I use my tone of voice. There are certain sentences. I call them language needles. I talk about this in my book. There's certain language needles that are, it's like little acupuncture needles in the form of language that I can put into the relational body between us, by speaking them into her listening. Words like, honey, your feelings matter to me. I'd never said that to any woman in my life before my wife. No wonder they were so angry with me. So many women, I've never cared about a woman's feelings in my freaking life. It's terrible to say, but it's a tragedy. But no one ever taught me to care about them. In fact, the opposite. I was only taught to not care about them.
Yeah. Which brings me to because we're going to finish now, but
Yeah.
brings me very nicely to the program that you mentioned about the program that you have for men. Is it just for men's ears only, or can I ask questions about what is
Oh,
it
sure.
about? How does it
Yeah.
work? And can I just say, I'm so glad you're doing it.
Thank
Please
you.
do it for as many men as you can, because there's something
Yeah.
that has changed in the way that it's all working at
Yeah.
the moment that is
Yeah.
quite
So that
confusing.
it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I'll have it's this so it's called Elevate Your Relationship. It's really like a men's group for men that are all circled around improving our intimate relationships. And I mean, there's a lot of curriculum, a lot of training, a lot of direct coaching. They get to work with me in that experience. But I'll sometimes sit there and I'll have a Zoom room full of 10 or 15 guys, and we're all talking about our relationships. And I've got fighter pilots, doctors, orthopedic surgeons. Heck, we had a convicted felon who had been in solitary confinement for 2 years in this program. That's a tragedy for another time. But just regular dudes, just the guys that make up our world in this room. And I'm like, this is unprecedented. Like, we're talking about our relationships and how to do them better. We're not being cynical about women, about relationship.
Being down to the bar and oh man,
Nope.
really
We're
having
not
a tough time. Oh, I'm sorry to hear
nope.
that. That's the end.
We are taking our responsibility for we're looking at our parts in the breakdown and how can we do this different to inspire trust, to inspire confidence in our partners, to heal wounds and betrayals and to make repairs. And
Is it just for men in relationships, or can it be for men who are looking for relationships and they want to
Mhm.
learn how to
Yeah.
be in a relationship?
Yeah, we have single men as well that join us. Yeah. Or we have men that are just out of relationships that also don't want to repeat old patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it face to face, or is it on Zoom or
It's not in person right now. We'll probably have some retreats that we do in the coming
yeah?
in the future. We want to do some live in-person retreats for
Yeah.
that program, but right now it's all online.
Well, that's great though, because then
Yeah.
you can reach more people.
Yeah, we have men in Europe.
Yeah.
We've had men in from Australia. Obviously, a lot of them are here in America and Canada, but we've men all over the world that participate.
Yeah,
Pretty
yeah.
cool.
Brian, thank you so much for meeting with me and for agreeing to
Thank
the
you.
interview. Thank you for sending me the book.
You're welcome.
So really, really helpful. And
Thank you.
if anybody wants to reach you, where can they reach you?
My website, bryanreeves.com. It's Brian with a Y. That's key.
Yeah,
Reeves, Reeves.com. I mean, you can find my book there. You can find a link to the Elevate Your Relationship program if someone's interested in that, or just you can reach out to me there. All my social media accounts are linked. Like that's bryanreeves.com. My book is on Amazon. It's in the UK on other distributors as well. Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you so much.
Soila, thank you so much. I've enjoyed this conversation.